On this video, I'll be working through the Hebrew text of Genesis 1-2. What I'm trying to do is slowly work through um, the Hebrew scriptures grammatically, at least ones that I believe have New Testament application to Christ, looking at the grammar and also doing like reading the text, doing vocabulary, grammar, followed then by a translation and then an application and an interpretation. So I did Genesis 1:1 a minute or so ago. On this video, I'm doing Genesis 1:2. So as we begin, verse 2, verse 1 was Bereshit bara Elohim et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Here in Genesis 1:2, we're going to look at the text first. I'll read it. V'ha'aretz hayata tohu vavohu v'choshek al pnei tahom v'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. It was sort of humorous that I taught Hebrew in seminary, and one of my students later went to see another student, and his his greeting was, well, tohu vavohu. So at any rate, we're back looking at vocabulary. And I would read this. Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was either soaring or hovering over the face of the waters. Let's look at the vocabulary. Haya is the verb to be. Tohu is a noun meaning formless or formlessness. Bohu is emptiness. Choshek is a noun meaning darkness. Al is a preposition upon. Panayim is a noun in dual form. Notice ayim, meaning face. And tahom is a noun meaning deep. Ruach is a noun meaning spirit. In the New Testament, Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. Richev is a verb in the PL stem, as we'll see here, and we'll explain that, meaning to hover. And mayim is a noun meaning waters. Notice we have it's a dual form again, the ayim, meaning waters. So let's begin, having looked at the vocabulary, with grammar. And I'll do this pretty much word by word or phrase by phrase. V'ha'aretz. V'ha'aretz, notice the ve again is the conjunction, but the noun is first. Normally in Hebrew, it is a verb-noun pattern, but we have the noun-verb pattern here. And so the noun, ha'aretz, is put here for emphasis. So what the text seems to be saying is, now the earth was, and focusing upon the earth. Notice also ha'aretz, we have the definite article ha again, followed by what we call compensatory lengthening in the vowel underneath it. It went from a pathak to a comet. Why? Because the aleph cannot take a doubling or a doggish forte. So we have vaha'aretz occurring, and it is in pause. So vaha'aretz, and then hayata. Hayata is a verb. It is what we call the G stem in Hebrew, or the cow, which means simple or light stem. And it is a third feminine singular from the root haya. Actually, haya means to be. Uh, so we have here what is historically called a final yod verb form. Historically, it was hayai with a final yod becoming haya later. And so these are called lamed hey verbs in that the final position under the lamed is a hey. Remember pa'al, uh, pe, ayin, lamed. So this is a lamed hey verb, and it was historically a lamed yod. In the third feminine singular, the hey changes to a ta. So haya becomes hayata, and you're adding the suffix a, and it means the earth, which is the subject here of this verse. So the earth was tohu vavohu. Tohu, notice as you pronounce these two words, tohu vavohu, you have alliteration or literary assonance. The sound is the same. Tohu vavohu. You can almost hear the idea of emptiness when you read these words. Tohu means formlessness, and bohu means emptiness. Notice also we have the vav, and under the vav you have a comments. Tohu vavohu. The vav here is a conjunction, and we translate it, now the earth was formless and empty, or amorphous, without form and empty. Then we go to the next phrase, v'choshek. Ve is the conjunction, which means and choshek means darkness. And darkness, notice we add the verb to be between the noun and the following phrase. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. Al panei tahom. Notice al is a preposition. Panei comes from the noun panayim. Notice ayim is a dual ending, like what we saw in shamayim. However, it is in what we call construct in Hebrew. So in Hebrew, when you have two nouns that stand back to back, they are called nouns in construct, meaning that they are standing with each other. When that occurs, the first noun will change its vowel pointing. So to home, we end up with. In other words, al panei tahom, sort of tahom. And then panayim, notice al becomes as the preposition upon, and al panayim becomes al panei, with the shava followed by the seri yod, and the seri yod is common in plural nouns that stand in construct in the first position of a construct chain relationship. For example, davar means word. If we wanted to put it into the plural, it would be devarim. In construct, In the masculine plural, it becomes divrei with the seriyod. The same can be seen in melech, the word for king. In the plural, melech is melachim. In the construct, it becomes malche, again with the seriyod in the plural. This is what we find here then. And so darkness was upon the face of the deep, al pnei tahom. When it's in construct, you put of between the two nouns, much like in Greek you have the Greek genitive. So darkness was upon the face of the deep. Tahom means something like ocean, and it is looking probably at the world ocean at the time that covered the earth. And then the next phrase is Veruach Elohim. And there is the conjunction ve again. And Ruach means spirit or wind. Veruach Elohim. And the wind of God or the spirit of God. Notice Elohim again. You have your two nouns in construct, and Ruach is the first position. So we would render it the Spirit of God, is the way we would translate it. Merachefet is a very interesting word. It comes from the root rachav, in the Spirit of God, merachefet. In Hebrew, most verbs will have three radicals or three consonants. Some are what we call biradical with two, but most have three consonants. So the mem here is a prefix, and the tav at the end is a suffix. This is what we call in Hebrew the D stem or the PL stem, meaning a stem that has a doubling, normally in the second root or consonant of the root. And this shows intensification. So the root here, rachav, and the word merachefet, rachav becomes a participle. So this is a D participle, or a PL, it can be called. That's another name for it. The reason for this is that often in the Hebrew verbal system, it is built around, as we've said before, a pei, an ayin, a lamed, pa'al, to do. So the whole verbal system, which includes 7 basic stems, grows out of the verb to do in some grammatical presentation. It depends. Some will just say, will not use that pattern, but many do. The particular word here is a PL or a D participle. The mem gives it away. Normally in Hebrew, in the D, in the what we call the D or the PL stem, gives it away as a participle. And the noun when it is prefixed to a root. So the root rachav is a PL participle. Like the imperfect of the PL, you have a shavah followed by a pathat. This is a vowel pattern that you find, a yeshaver, a shavah pathat, doubling of the middle radical. So normally the hey would be doubled, but we can't double it here since it is a guttural. And so we do not double it because gutturals cannot be doubled. So merachefet is what we end up with. And notice the two segols with the tav show that we're looking at a feminine participial form, a feminine participle. And this goes with ruach. So the Spirit of God was hovering, or um, soaring is another possibility. Notice rahaf means to do something with intensity. The same root, by the way, is used in Deuteronomy 32 of an eagle stirring up the nest. When she behave, she hovers intensely over her young to nudge them out of the nest, to teach them to fly. And she normally flies under them to help them in this process. But she is hovering over them like with intensity. This is the idea, I think, of the word here. Some want to translate this: a wind of God was soaring, and would relate it to an Ugaritic uh, text where that verb can be used to soar. And that's possible. I guess I prefer the idea of Deuteronomy 32 of an eagle hovering over its nest. And al panei hamayin, then, in other words, to bring creation into maturity. And so al panei hamayin, God is hovering over the waters. And al is a preposition, and panayim again becomes panay. Panayim is a dual form for face. So God is hovering over the face of the waters. Notice panayim, the dual form, becomes panay in construct with the final seri yod. This is a noun in construct, masculine plural, followed by hamayim. So hamayim is the word waters, and thus hovering upon the face of the waters. Notice mayim here. Ha, again, is the definite article, and we have the doggish forte in the mem, shows that something has assimilated in hamayim. And that is basically, again, the article, and the lamed of the article has assimilated. How mayim becoming ha mayim. It probably then, since the lamed, how mayim, went into the mem by progressive assimilation, we have a doggish forte following. So, by a long a vowel instead of a patha, hal mayim. And by the way, that long a vowel is putting it in pause. Uh, it is caused because it's in pause here. That is al pene ha mayim. We're putting it in pause since it's the end or in the last position. And that is why we have the comments under the mayim. So how mayim, the lamed assimilated by progressive assimilation into the mem, and the amayim, the pathak, changes to a comment because it's in pause. And so we read the text by translation again. And the earth was formless and empty, formlessness and emptiness, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God, the way I'm translating it, was hovering over the face of the waters. Notice three conditions existed. The earth was formless and empty. Secondly, darkness was upon the face of the world's ocean, and God's Spirit was hovering over the face of the waters, getting ready to bring maturity, getting ready to bring a creative act out of this situation. And as I look at the New Testament, and we'll get into this in more detail in future videos that we try to do, it's interesting in John 1 that Christ is spoken of as the light in the midst of the darkness that overcomes the darkness. In verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. And here, the darkness could not overcome God's creative purpose in creating the world. In the same way, in Christ, who was not created but who is eternal in the second person of the Blessed Trinity, Jesus has come to this world as the God man, and the darkness could not overcome that light that he brought through his death and glorious resurrection.